Today we're going to work on the bent arm planche, specifically the bent arm planche through to handstand that's going to help us towards the 90-degree handstand push-up. The cool thing is with a slight modification we can make it much easier. So even if you're newer to calisthenics and bodyweight strength, you'll be able to do the same movement. And we'll also show you the progressions if you're a little bit stronger, got a little bit more experience, and you can take it all the way up to handstand. Now this can be done on P-bars, boxes, but my favorite is to use weight plates. And that's what I'm going to do the demos on today. And I'm using these 20K plates. They're nice and thick, and I'm going to use 2 of them. That gives me about this much clearance. And that's going to affect how much I can take the head and shoulders down below the hands when we transition through to that shoulder stand and going up to a deficit handstand push-up. So this is the setup. I'm going to have my hands externally rotated, so I'm going to turn the hands out so it brings the arms into the torso. And our first position that we need to get into, and it's a great warm-up position, is the shoulder stand. Now if you've got a setup like me, we might need to turn the cap round, and then I'm going to see if I can get in to a straight body position like that. Now it's really cool that you can talk in this position. If you can't, we need to make it slightly easier. This should be a rest or a home position that we can hang out in. If you can't get into a straight body position, we can make it tucked, which is a lot easier. So I'm going to again bring the arms in towards the torso, and then I'm going to go in to this tucked position like this. Notice my head is very close to the floor. I can even touch if I need to. We don't want to have lots of weight in the head, but it can be used as a safety or a learning mechanism. Just don't smash your head into it, and if you're scared of going over, have someone put their hand by your low back, or position it so you're nice and close to the wall and you can bend one leg and take it over, and just use a little bit of wall assist. Next, let's look at the bent arm planche position. So bent arm planche is basically seen as having the hips and shoulders in line, a bent arm position, and straight body. Now straight body would be like so, but as you can tell by my voice, that's a hard position to get into, especially when I'm not fully warmed up. So we're going to start out with easier positions. Now if you're newer to this and a little bit less conditioned, we're going to use the elbows a little bit more. We're going to use them to lean on, but we still want to lean on the upper body. So it's not just an elbow lever, so it's not this, but we want to open them up a little bit more. So there's a bit of friction, a bit of contact there. So it's like a hybrid between an elbow lever or like a peacock position in yoga that you'd see people do like this, and the bent arm position where we have literally no contact with the elbow, which is the much harder version. So we're just going to use as much as that as you need to get some play in the position and get a little bit of hold time there. So external rotation, we're going to make it a little bit easier by going into a tuck first, using some of that contact between the upper arm, as much elbow as you need to. And then I'm going to aim to have hip and shoulder in line, something like that. You probably need to put a video camera over there and then watch it back so you can check you're like this and not like this or like this. So we're aiming to have the back more parallel with the floor. And you might need to play around with the distance the plates are or the bars are, or whatever your setup is. Just see if you can hold a tuck for around 10 seconds. If you can't, we need to make it slightly easier, bring the elbows in. And if that feels very comfortable, all we're going to do is just open the position out. Now the positions are very similar to the positions we use in the front lever and the planche. We just slowly increase the lever arm by going into like a froggy position, then a straddle. You could play with things like half lay, open hip straddle, and then eventually straight. So a froggy position is more like that. Straddle position like so. Half lay, open hip, but bent knees. And then eventually straight body, like so. Now notice there with my straight body, my elbows are actually beside my body. That's what we're aiming for. But if you do need a little bit of help, just bring those elbows in more. So now we have 2 positions. We have that shoulder stand position, and we have the bent arm planche variation that we can hold for 5 to 10 seconds. We want to attempt now the eccentric, so going from the shoulder stand down to that bent arm planche. So remember, you're going to your positions, not my positions I'm demoing. And ideally on an eccentric, it's going to be very slow and controlled, and we can even talk as we do it. So if it's the tuck one, it's going to look something like this. So tuck shoulder stand, coming through to tucked bent arm position, show control, come back out. And then you could do any of the progressions all the way through to straight body. Now remember, the straight body could be a straight body shoulder stand, but you could then open to a easier position for the bent arm planche. So you don't have to have the same movement, and that would be very common because the shoulder stand, once you get the balance point, is relatively easy, where the bent arm planche is quite a bit harder. So a lot of people will be able to do the straight body position in the shoulder stand, but not be able to do straight body in the bent arm planche. But let's see if I can demo one. So straight body, push up and forwards into the bent arm planche. Next, let's add the handstand component in. Now with the handstand, you need to be able to handstand on whatever surface that you're using for the shoulder stand and the bent arm planche. So if you're P-bars, you need to be able to balance on the P-bars. Now it doesn't have to be a straight handstand. I personally prefer people to use a straight handstand when they're doing these type of drills, and it basically then going through an eccentric handstand push up. So the elbows and arms are coming in to the torso as I come down, head and shoulders are coming forwards to find that shoulder stand position, and then look, I can then transition through to the bent arm planche, whatever variation I have. So straight away I'm just adding the handstand transition to that movement we were just working on. So if you don't have a handstand, you could just practice your handstand balance supersetted with the shoulder stand through to bent arm planche. So then we have the full eccentric movement. We're going from the handstand all the way down to your bent arm planche. Now we need to start thinking about the concentric, the going back up. Now we can do exactly the same as we've done with the eccentric and just break it apart. So start with only the bent arm planche to shoulder stand. Again, we can pick any of the positions. But what most people need to do here is when they start to make the transition up to shoulder stand, they actually have to move forward slightly to get enough counterbalance with the head and shoulders to lift the hips and the legs up, depending on where their body is, in terms of what body position they're in. So if I'm in a straddle position, I need to come forwards, then sweep it up into that position. And then I can obviously practice going between the two. So you will have to play with that sweeping forwards and backwards, and that's where turning the hands out and getting comfortable with that shoulder movement away from the hands, doing this type of thing, is very beneficial. So you might again want to play around with different hand positions and even different surfaces. Maybe going to P-bars is going to be easier for some people because you can extend further forwards without straining the wrist too much. Now the cool thing with this concentric, doing the bottom up movement, is we actually create a little bit of momentum of the seesaw. So head and shoulders come down, hips come up, which when we've got a strong handstand push-up already, you can just add that momentum to the handstand push-up and then make it all the way up to handstand. Now obviously this is a jump up in terms of skill, strength and balance, but if you're there already, you can start to play with it. You might not be able to catch the top, but it's a real cool movement to play with. Again, you can do it with all the movements. The tuck one would actually help you even more because you could nearly kip out of it. So I could go into a tuck position here, tuck here, keep the legs up. See how that opened up and helped me up. I didn't quite get all the way up. I didn't hold the balance at the top. And if anything, using speed and momentum and a kick or a kip out of it is going to be harder to balance because you're probably going to spill out of different positions with too much energy, whether it's underbalanced, overbalanced or up in the air, but it does help you get out. Now, if you do the stricter version, it's easier to control, easier to balance, but you need that much more strength. So if I do a strict straddle position, bent arm planche, come through to shoulder stand and then push up, you can see it takes way more strength, but it's much easier to balance there. I can show control at the top and then I can come down for exactly the same movement, but the eccentric finishing back in that bent arm planche. So easier to balance, but harder from a strength point of view. And then once you can do a controlled eccentric and you can do a controlled concentric, we can then put them together to what's seen as a full repetition of hands raised 90-degree handstand push-up.